The roots of gold-faded family are in the manuscript collection MSS 084, housed at History, Colorado. J.J. Brown was an owner of the Ibex Mining Company, husband to unsinkable Margaret Molly Brown, and father to son Lawrence and daughter Helen. Jody answered questions from the audience about her writing process and the Brown family. The question was, when did you know you were going to write a book?
So I would say I was probably a year in, and then I went up to Boulder and went through the Campion papers. Cassidy inviting me over to the Regis Archives to see a piece of the Little Johnny Gold. So all of a sudden it was like the universe was kind of saying, you kind of need to tell the story here. And you're correct. Kristen Iverson had used the same collection 20 years ago to write the book. And she wrote it from the perspective of Margaret. And I really felt that his side of the story balanced hers and it was additive to hers. But it was a side of the story that had not been told about the gold. You know, the gold is just kind of, oh, they found gold, let's move on. When their whole lives were just fascinating, and there was this story that I felt was in there that just kind of called to me. And I'd say that happened, it took a while because I was a little overwhelmed. And then by year 3, when we started doing the museum, and year 4, we really got our traction, then all of a sudden you're just dying to tell the story. And the photographs were a big part of that. And then really identifying in the letters. I mean, I started transcribing letters. Once you start transcribing letters, because you can't read the writing, and so it takes you an hour to do one letter. Once you start transcribing people's very personal communication back and forth, I think it forms a relationship as a writer and a researcher. I think all of a sudden now you're in relationship with the family, and I didn't intend to be in relationship with the family, but now I am. And I feel, so I would say I got a spark year 1, the universe pushed me forward 2 and 3, and then the museum said, don't stop, right? Because I had the full backing of the museum saying, you know what, I think you can do this. And all you need is one person saying that something you're gonna write is of value, and then you kind of keep going.
Did you contact the Descendants, and what do they think about the book?
So that's a great question. Did I contact the Descendants? I tried valiantly to contact. The worst part about being a researcher is the name Brown. Okay, it is a horrible name. The second worst thing in our lives is a lack of white pages and trying to find people. But trying to find an Irish Brown in Pennsylvania, yeah, excruciating. We did track down one of JJ's descendants. It was on this side, JK to this guy, who I was in contact with. I could only communicate by fax, okay? This very retro gentleman who sent me genealogy from Ireland of the Browns, so I knew the name of the parish they went to, and so I had that sense of it. Trying to find Browns was incredibly difficult. The museum is in regular contact with Descendants on Margaret's side. We were trying to get at JJ's side. And with the name of Brown, rather than a Tobin, which was Margaret's maiden name, it was very, very difficult. Now I'm going to fast forward to one of the coolest stories of my life. So the book comes out, and it was January. And I'm going to try to do this without getting emotional because it was so profound. I got a phone call from the museum saying, you've got mail at the Molly Brown House Museum. And there was this envelope. And it was 7 pages of typewritten, powerful words from the great-grandson of J.J. Brown, Lawrence Brown's grandson. His name is Lance. And Lance, for years, had let his sister shoulder all the burden of answering the questions, being supportive of the Molly Brown Museum, and he had really not been involved. But he read the book, he loved the book, and then he shared intimate stories of growing up with his own father that were very, very personal. But what he said to me was, however painful it was for me to read some things in your book, it was the truth. It was the truth about my family. And it was the truth about things that had gone on. So if I never sell another book, this man told me that I had explained the arc of his life. And so at that moment, my life is complete. I was grateful I hadn't talked to him, because he would have colored me to maybe hold back on some of the things I put in the book. Because it does, the good times are really good, and I hope you feel that when you read it, and the bad times are really bad. There's some bad stuff. It's not here. And so I wrote him back pitifully, 4 pages. It was horrible. I couldn't match his just power, you know? So in answer to your question, I tried valiantly. We got lucky on a couple of fronts. And yet now, this man's 2 daughters will now have this whole history of their family.
What was the relationship like between J.J. and Margaret Brown?
They were Irish. They were Catholic. I don't know if they prayed while they threw the plates or not. But they were passionate people. That's the best way to say it, right? Passionately in love. You fall in love and then you find gold. Does it get any better than that, right? But you're a workaholic. JJ, I believe in my heart, was the quintessential workaholic at the time. Because, as Flo brought up, he was trying to replicate this incredible success of finding the largest vein of gold ever. So you start buying more mines, and then you're on a train between here and Leadville for 9 hours. If you go through the railroad timetables, you know it's a 9-hour train ride. And you go back and forth to Leadville, and you leave your wife really as primary caretaker of the kids. So at that point, you send your kids sometimes to boarding school, and you're doing philanthropy. And so there's this whole, wealth buys you things that you can have, like boarding school and experiences, but can wealth buy you love? And can it buy you the respect of your children? And can it buy you the love of your children? And so there was another moment, and this suitcase represents probably what was most important to Lawrence Brown. And in this black suitcase, I won't touch it because it's so fragile, this contains nothing but photographs. And when he donated it, the photographs were in this case. And the other day I was thinking to myself, because of the time period, because of the expense, whatever's in this box, unlike us flashing our cell phone, whatever in this box was incredibly important to someone. So Margaret's brother Dan was close to JJ and Margaret both, and his photograph's in here. And other family members' pictures who may have only had their picture taken one time are in this box. And so when you sift through it, I was kind of struck. This is where I kind of spent more hours than I probably should have, because I just got sucked into the story of who these people were, right? And they had lives.
Why did Lawrence keep all the papers, and why did he donate them to History Colorado?
So he was so mad. He died in 46. He was so mad probably the last 15 years of his life about how his mother was portrayed and how his father was portrayed. I can't speak for Lawrence, but I'll speak for me. I think if you go through the records, maybe he was hoping that somebody would go through all the papers and write the true story of his parents. And I think that's why he saved it all, because he was so angry. There was a Fortune magazine article, and then there was, another magazine, True magazine, that had done these exposés, just nothing but fabricated stories. And he actually, in the archives, he has penned a rebuttal to some of these letters, and he enlists his favorite aunt to help him refute, because they make it into a radio show, Margaret's Life. So I think he gave it here saying, please someday somebody tell the true story of my folks. And plus being a sentimental mush, I don't think the man could bear to part with anything. I mean, but there were cool things you find too. He lost his military ID overseas. And somehow, miraculously, it got to his wife a couple years later. And so he carried a 4-leaf clover in it, because you can touch it. It's in the folders. And he carried a prayer card. And so you can see all of these things that this man carried into World War I with him. I think that's super cool. But he saved his veterans cards and his, just you name it, he saved it. Receipts for flowers. Then the receipts of his life are, that's more than I can do. That's more than I got. This was good.